Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Before we start with our new math lesson for today, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell for more videos. And for my students, before I start, may I request you to get a graphing paper or your math notebook and also your calculator so that you can follow with the discussion. Okay, thank you. Now, so we're going to talk about lesson 4.3, placing figures in a coordinate plane. So for the reference of my students, you can check it on page 232 to 245 of your books. Okay? Now, what are the learning competencies involved? First is we will be applying the midpoint formula to prove some geometric properties. And then we will graph and solve problems involving circles and other geometric figures on the coordinate plane. So if you are going to ask me if how they are related in a sense that we are going to use the midpoint formula using some geometric properties that are being placed in the coordinate plane. Okay, so that's why I'm asking those who are watching right now to prepare your graphing papers, pencil, pen, and ruler so that you can follow with the discussion. Now, let's talk about first the midpoint. Okay, so before we start, let's have the activity 9 before we go to the midpoint formula. Place me right. Place the following coordinates in a Cartesian plane and try to find the midpoint between each pair. So just like what you are seeing here, guys, let's say we have segment AC. The midpoint is point B. So as you can see, the definition of a midpoint, it divides exactly the segment into two congruent parts. So if it is not a midpoint if it does not divide the segment into two congruent parts. Now, so how do we graph? Let's say last time I was able to give you a recall about the Cartesian coordinate plane. So let's say this is the Cartesian coordinate plane. Okay, so in a Cartesian coordinate plane, we have the x and the y-axis. Okay, so just remember the points for every quadrant. So we begin with the origin. Origin has coordinates of 0, 0. So for the first quadrant, we have the coordinates of positive and positive. And then for the quadrant 2, we have the coordinates of negative and positive. And quadrant 3, we have both negative. And then quadrant 4, we have positive and negative. So we are always starting with locating the x and then followed by the y coordinates. Now, let's have number 1. Try it on the Cartesian plane. Point A 6, 8, and then point B 12, 10. Graph it and then locate the midpoint. And then later on, we will check if I will be doing a survey wherein I'll be asking you if which do you prefer most, graphing to get the midpoint or using the midpoint formula. Okay? Now, the midpoint of this is M, or midpoint is 9, 9. So for those who got it, very good. Now, Teacher Dong, is there an easy way for us to be able to get easily the midpoint or the coordinates of the midpoint? Yes, that's by using the midpoint formula. So midpoint formula is being used to find the center of a line segment. So let's say we have the line segment AC, okay? So for every point, we have coordinates x and y. Now, how are we going to get the coordinates of the midpoint? So we will be using this formula. We will just simply add the x's, x sub 1 plus x sub 2 over 2. Then for the y, we will be adding y sub 1 plus y sub 2 all over 2. So it's easy to remember, guys. We just have to add the x's divided by 2. And then we also need to add the y's divided by 2. Where are we going to get the x's and y's? In the endpoints of the segment. So we have this. Okay, we will be adding the x's and then we will be adding the y's. And then we will divide them both by 2. Okay, so I hope you can follow. Now, let's go back here. Let's have number 2. Number 2. So for number 2, we have point C 511 and point D 95. So first, to avoid confusion, you have to mark them. So 5 is your x sub 1, 11 is your y sub 1, your x sub 2 is 9, and your y sub 2 is 5. And then after that, okay, so of course we have to use the midpoint formula, x sub 1 plus x sub 2 over 2, and y sub 1 plus y sub 2 over 2. Now, the next thing is we will substitute the values. So for number 2, we have M. the midpoint, okay, then 5 is your x sub 1 and your x sub 2 is 9 over 2. And then we have the y's 11 plus 5 over 2. Then the next thing is we will simplify them. 5 plus 9 is, for those who are using calculator, you can do it directly, okay, using your device. 5 plus 9 is 14 divided by 2. So 14 divided by 2. And then here, 11 plus 5 is 16 divided by 2. Okay, then the next thing is we will simplify. 14 divided by 2 is 7, while 16 divided by 2 is 8. So your midpoint is 7, 8. So just do the same thing with the other examples. Okay, so if one of the coordinates is negative, just remember to include the negative when you are substituting. Please don't forget that. Okay, if there is a negative coordinate, please include the negative sign. Don't forget it. Now, so for number 3, you should be getting a midpoint of 4, 4. Then for number 4 rather, you should be getting a midpoint of 4, 1. Okay, and lastly, let's use a formula here. Okay, so this is your x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, and then y sub 2. So we will substitute the formula, add the x as negative 5 plus 8 over 2. As you can see, I substituted directly the negative. And then we have negative 1 plus 6 over 2. Then the next thing is simplify. So negative 5 plus 8 is 3 over 2. And then negative 1 plus 6 is 5 over 2. Then you can have this as your answer, or you can convert it to decimal. 3 divided by 2 is 1.5. And then 5 divided by 2 is 3.5. So we can say that the midpoint of this, or the coordinates of the midpoint, are 1.5 and 2.5. Okay, so you can have an answer of decimal. It depends on the exam that you are going to encounter. If the exam is requiring you to write fraction, you have to write fraction. If it requires you to write decimal, you have to write in decimal. Okay, so I hope you can follow. For those who have questions and clarifications regarding the use of the midpoint formula, you can simply comment down below, and then for my students, you can contact me, you know how. Now, let's have the first example after the activity. Find the midpoint between point A 4, 8, and then point B 1, 12. Now, I would like you to do this. Okay, so use the formula x sub 1 plus x sub 2 over 2, and y sub 1 plus y sub 2 over 2. Okay, so I'll be waiting for your answer. What is the midpoint? Okay, very good. The midpoint is 2.510. Okay, so thank you so much for those who can follow. So for those who are not, and then you are using already your calculator, please make sure that you are substituting or you are entering the right values in your calculators. Okay, now let's proceed to example 2. You try, so you are the one who will try this. We have two examples under two items under example number 2. Please do them. Okay, so let's just use the change the pen to white. Now for letter A, we have the points 2, 7 and 14, 9. So give me the midpoint. So just add the x's and then add the y. So for you not to be confused, mark them. This is x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2. Okay, so what is the midpoint for your example number 2? Very good. The midpoint is 8, 8. How about for B? We have point negative 5, 8, and the second point we have 2, negative 4. So what is the midpoint? Just simply substitute the values including the negative. Please don't forget that. Very good. It's negative 1.5 and 2. So the coordinates of the midpoint for the second, or for B, we have negative 1.5 and 2. Okay, so thank you so much for those who are participating. Most especially to my students, you need this. Now, let's proceed to example number 3. In example number 3, as you can see, this is quite a different example because as you can see, the midpoint is given. Let's read the problem. Segment AP has a midpoint of point H34. So as you can see, the midpoint is given. So let's just change the pen. Segment AP has a midpoint of point H34 and one of the endpoints is a negative 30. What are the coordinates of P, the other endpoint? So if this is the line, guys, or the segment rather, the endpoints are A and P. Okay, and then your midpoint is H. So according to the problem, your A has coordinates of negative 3, 0. While for H, it has coordinates of 3, 4. And for P, we don't have values. So we are looking for x sub 2 and y sub 2. How are we going to do that? We will still be using the midpoint formula, x sub 1 plus x sub 2 over 2 and y sub 1 plus y sub 2 over 2. Okay? So as you can see, our given values are A30, point H34, which is the midpoint, and then we have P unknown values x sub 2, y sub 2. So the idea here is that we will substitute the given values to the formula. As you can see, your x sub 1 and your y sub 1 are given. So therefore, we can substitute them. We have x sub 1, which is 3, plus the unknown x sub 2 over 2. How about for the midpoint, which is 3? You just have to simply equate it to 3 because the midpoint is given. Then for the second one, your y sub 1 here is 0 plus y sub 2 over 2. And then the y of the midpoint is, or y coordinate of the midpoint is 4. So let's substitute. So this is now the coordinates of the point P. Okay, so let's simplify. The next thing is we will cross multiply. 2 times 3 is 6, and then 3, bring down 3 plus x sub 2. Then 0 plus y sub 2 is y sub 2. Then 2 times 4 is 8. So you already have your y sub 2, which is y sub 2, which is 8. Now let's have x sub 2. So we will isolate x sub 2 by removing 3 here. So 6 now, and then the opposite of 3 is negative 3. Okay. Okay, so for A, it's negative 3. I'm sorry for that. So this will become positive 3. According to the given, it's negative 3. Okay, so x sub 2 equals 6 plus 3 equals 9. So therefore, the coordinates of P are 9, 8. Okay, so I forgot to put negative 3 for this. Okay, so we just have to substitute the given values, and then after that, simplify, cross multiply, and then combine the similar terms and isolate the variable, which is the unknown value. Okay, so that's it. It's not very hard. Okay, just simply use the same formula, then after that, substitute the given values for you to be able to get the coordinates of one of the endpoints. Okay, so I hope you can follow. Now, let's have activity number 10. This is prior to the second part of the lesson, which is about placing figures in the coordinate plane. What shape am I? So we have 5 items here, and then I would like you to prepare your Cartesian coordinate plane using your math notebooks or your graphing paper so that you can identify what shapes are these. So just remember, guys, that when we have 3 points, okay, when we have 3 points, automatically we are talking about triangle. Okay, so because we're talking about shapes, okay, triangle. Now, for number 2, we also have 3 points, 1, 2, 3, so this is also triangle. Then for number 3, this is quadrilateral because as you can see, it has 4 points until 5th. Now, the question is, what type of triangle is it? So let's just focus with the types of triangle according to the sides. So the first type is equilateral triangle. Equilateral triangle means all the sides are equal. And then next we have isosceles triangle. When we say isosceles triangle, 2 of the sides of a triangle are equal. And then the last one is we have what we call iscalene triangle. So this is iscalene triangle. So it means that no sides are equal. Okay. So let's have number 1 and 2. Plot the points. Okay. Use the Cartesian coordinate plane. And please be mindful if where are you going to put the point. Okay. So depending on the quadrant or signs of the quadrant. For number 1, this is supposed to be isosceles triangle. Because if you will graph it and you will visualize, so you will see that 2 sides are equal. Okay, if you will be using the distance formula in finding out, so we have 10.3 or 2 10.3s, and then we have 10. So as you can see, the 2 sides are equal. But what you need to practice is that when you graph, you need to visualize if what type of triangle is it by counting the number of units. But if you will ask me, is there some other way so that we can find the length of each side? Yes, okay, so use the distance formula. So solve for segment AB, solve for segment BC, and solve for segment AC. What is the distance formula? This is the lesson that we've discussed in the previous lesson. or weeks rather. Okay, we have square root of quantity x sub 2 minus x sub 1 square plus y sub 2 minus y sub 1 square. So this is the distance formula. But I would like you to practice looking at the figure in the Cartesian coordinate plane and then identify what shape is it. Next, let's have number 2. So for number 2, if you will be graphing this one, you can see that for those who are watching and most especially to my students, please don't forget to graph this. Okay, this is your assignment. Now, for number 2, this is Iskalin because if you will be graphing this one, okay, so you will see that no sides are equal. Okay, now, how about for numbers 3, 4, 5? Okay, so there are different types of quadrilaterals. We have what we call the, let's say this is a square. Okay, when we say square, all the sides are equal. Okay, we also have the rectangle. Opposite sides are equal. And then we also have rhombus. All sides are equal, but not the angles. And then we also have the parallelogram. Opposite sides are also equal, and opposite angles are equal. Then we have the trapezoid. Okay, only one pair of the sides are equal. And then, if no sides are equal, we call it trapezium. Okay, so just like this. Now, let's identify numbers 3, 4, 5 with what type of quadrilateral are they. So, for number 3, we have point L negative 2, 8, point I 5, 8, K 5, 1, and then E negative 2, 1. So, for number 3, after you graph or plot the points and then connected the points, so this one is square. Okay, so for my students, please make sure to graph the following because in your examination, you will have the same problem. Now, let's have number 4. Okay, S negative 1, 5, O negative 9, negative 1, positive 9, negative 1, point N 6, negative 6, G negative 4, 0. So for number 4, this is rectangle. So for those who are watching, please make sure to graph for you to be able to find out if it is really rectangle. Then for number 5, this is parallelogram. For you to find out, most especially to my students, please plot the points. Okay, that's it. All you need to do is to plot the points, connect the dots or connect the points, and then after that, identify what shape is it. So it doesn't mean that it has 4 sides, you can call it square or what. It depends on the properties that are there. Okay, now let's proceed. Guidelines for placing figures on a coordinate plane. So number 1, use the origin as vertex or center. For number 2, okay, so when you are actually making a figure in the Cartesian coordinate plane, focus on the following guidelines. Okay, so if you will be identifying the points that you will be using. So number 1, as much as possible, use the origin as your vertex or center. And then for number 2, place at least one side of a polygon on an x-axis. Okay, so just make sure that the polygon or the shape will touch the x-axis. And make sure that the polygon for number 1, first guideline, so you have to use the vertex. You have to use the origin as the vertex or the center of the figure. Then for number 3, as you can see, keep the figure in the first quadrant. Because why? In the first quadrant, we only have the signs positive, positive, which are easy to identify. Then for number 4, use coordinates that will make computation as simple as possible. Do not use too complicated values like decimals, fractions. Okay, as much as possible, please use whole numbers. Now, let's proceed. 4. Give the coordinates of points M and P without using the new variable. Now, all we need to do here, as you can see, the illustration is quite simple, but you have to analyze it for you to be able to get the unknown values. Alright, so as you can see, it's here, square. Okay, so how are we going to know that it is a square? So as you can see, it has 4 congruent sides. Okay, and then after that, how are we going to identify the coordinates of M and coordinates of P? We will be identifying them based on the given values. Alright, so for A, 0A, so X is your 0 and this is Y. Okay, so write, this is the first step, write the value here, which is the Y. And then after that, how about here? Since it is a square from the origin up to this Y value or Y unit, okay, it must be equal also from the origin up to the X. So therefore, we can say that this is also positive 8. So remember that in the first quadrant, the signs of the coordinates are positive, positive. Now, teacher, can we identify already the coordinates of the points M and P. Yes. So for point M, okay, so I locate your X and Y. Your X is A, X is the horizontal, and then Y is the vertical. And then your Y is as that. Now, for point P, as you can see, it touches the x-axis. If it touches the x-axis, the first value must be the one or the unit that is in the x-axis in this point. So, as you can see, this is A. How about the y? It does not go up or down, so we can say that the y is 0 because it touches the x-axis. Remember, if the point touches the x-axis, the y is 0. And if the point touches the y-axis, the other way around, x is 0. Now, let's proceed. Rhombus. So, rhombus, when we say rhombus, all the sides are also equal. The initial step is identify the units, okay, using the given value so that we can identify points M and P, right? So, identify the unit here, 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 and here. So, here, so x and y, as you can see, 0 is x, and then your y is h. And opposite of h, as you can see, below is negative h. That's the idea that we have. Because in the fourth quadrant and the third quadrant, the sign of y is negative. And if we go down, it is really negative. Now, here, k, this will serve as your x, and then opposite of k is negative k. Okay, so I hope you can follow. Then can we now identify the values? Okay, so as you can see, this point touches the x-axis. So therefore, your x is the negative k that you are seeing, and then your y is 0. And then here, okay, it touches the y-axis, so therefore automatically your x is 0 and your y is negative. So as simple as that. All you need to do is to analyze first and do not put up any other values, and then base your values from the given coordinates. Now let's proceed. Now, give the coordinates of points M and P without using any new variable, isosceles trapezoid. So when we say isosceles trapezoid, opposite sides, one pair of opposite sides are congruent. Now, where are we going to get the answer here for point M? So identify it. So here, this is the point, and then draw a mark going to the x-axis. This is the x, it's B. And then here, this is the other point. Draw a mark going to the x-axis. So this is x, so this is A. Same here. Draw a mark going to the x-axis. So therefore, this is negative B. And then here, draw a mark going to the x-axis. Therefore, this is negative A. And we're done. And here, of course, okay, it's C. And then here, it's negative C. Now, let's proceed. Oh, sorry, it's 0. Or the symbol O, rather. It's the symbol O. Now, let's proceed. Okay, so here, for point M, we can now say that your x is negative B and your y is positive C. Okay, so as simple as that. That's for trapezoid. Next, we have rectangular rectangle. Teacher, we only have one given coordinates. Now, that's not the problem. All we need to do is to use this point E so that we can identify the other values. So this one is the origin, so therefore we can say we have 0, 0 for that. Now, right here and here, so this is your y, this is your x. Your x will be A, and your y will be B. And then to identify the coordinates of R, so as you can see, it touches the y-axis, so therefore your x is 0, and then we have B for y. And here, it touches the x-axis, so therefore your x is A, and then 0 for y. Simple as that. I hope you can follow. Next, we have letter B, rectangle ABCD centered at the origin. So as you can see, for the previous examples, we are following the guidelines a while earlier. So rectangle ABCD is centered at the origin, right? Now, how are we going to identify? So identify the units, the number of units from the origin. Now, here, this is your x, and then this is your y. So therefore, this is A, this is B, right? And then after that, opposite of A is negative A, and then opposite of B is negative B. then we can have the answers. So for point A, your x is b and then your y is negative a. No. It's negative a and your y is b. Okay? Negative a and b. And then here below, point D, your x is negative a and your b is negative. Your y is negative b. And then for point C, your x is a and then your y is negative. Okay? If you have questions, most especially to my students, please contact me. Now, let's have this one. In reality, you can also experience this kind of example. Use the figure below to answer the following. Letter A, what kind of quadrilateral is ABCO? So how are we going to find out? As you can see, we have the same unit from x to the origin, from x going up to this point, it's ym, and then here it's xm. So therefore, we can say that these two sides are congruent. So that's why we can call it as square because of that explanation. Now for letter B, find the midpoints of AC and segment BO. What do they prove? Okay, so first we will find the midpoint of AC and then we will also find the midpoint of BO. So for the midpoint of AC, mark them. This is x sub 1, this is y sub 1, this is x sub 2, y sub 2. Okay, what is the midpoint formula? The midpoint formula is x sub 1 plus x sub 2 over 2, and then y sub 1 plus y sub 2 over 2. Right? So your x sub 1 is 0, and then your x sub 2 is m. Just add, divided by 2. And your y sub 1 is m, plus your y sub 2 is 0 over 2. Then simplify. So we have m over 2, m over 2. So 0 plus m is m, and then m plus 0 is m. Okay? And how about the midpoint of segment BO? Segment BO, okay? BO. So this is your x sub 1, y sub 1, x sub 2, y sub 2. And then, okay, right? Your x sub 1 is m plus 0 for x sub 2 over 2. And then your y sub 1 is m, and then your y sub 2 is 0 over 2. As you can see, they are just the same. M plus 0 is m over 2, m over 2. Okay, so therefore, we have the same midpoint. So this is now the midpoint. It has coordinates of m over 2, m over 2. What does it imply? It only implies that the two segments are congruent because they have the same midpoint. Right? And they are intersecting at the same midpoint. That's the idea. Even though two segments intersect at the same midpoint, we cannot easily say that they are congruent unless the segments are, unless the midpoint are the same. And of course, that's the time that we can say that the two segments are congruent. Now, for letter C, find the slope of segment AC and segment BO. When we say slope, it's the stiffness of the line. Okay, stiffness of the line. So it's rise over run. So for the formula for the slope of a line. So for the slope of a line, so the formula is, all you need to do is to subtract y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 2. X sub 1 rather. Now that's the formula. Now we need to look for the slope of AC. So we need to look for the slope of AC. And we need to look also for the slope of BO. Let's see. Now for AC, okay, same thing, your y sub 2 for AC is 0 minus your y sub 1 which is m over your x sub 2 is m minus your x sub 1 which is 0. So 0 minus m is negative m, and then m minus 0 is m. So negative m divided by m is negative 1. So they are the same. M divided by m is 1, and then it has negative, so negative 1. So this is the slope of the first line. How about the second line? Here your y sub 2 is 0 minus your y sub 1 which is m, and then your x sub 2 is 0 and then minus m. Then after that, okay, so 0 minus m is negative m, negative m. Negative m divided by negative m is 1. So as you can see, we have negative 1 and 1. What does it imply? We can say that the two lines are perpendicular. When we say perpendicular, the intersection part, they form four right angles. When we say right angles, angle that measures 90 degrees. Now, we can say that the diagonals, so we call them diagonals, are perpendicular. You will also encounter this example in your exam to my students and then to the activity that I'll be asking you to do. Now, for my students, please don't forget to answer this activity. Find out more. And then for those, for the viewers, okay, that I have, thank you so much for supporting my channel. And then for those who are new here, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell for more videos. Yeah, so thank you so much for being here with me and then for supporting my channel. Have a great day.